Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, back to the streets of Metro City, a not really sequel, and the third of one of the bloodiest games of the time. Hi, I'm your host Jared, and today is August 25th, 1993. What better way to kick things off than with a spinning lariat, released in August 1993 for the Super NES, was Final Fight 2. Final Fight 2 is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Play as the returning wrestler-turned-mayor Mike Hagar, or new characters Maki and Carlos. This time around, it's Guy's fiance that's been kidnapped by the notorious Mad Gear Gang. Go through 6 levels beating the crap out of every single enemy in your way. Punch, kick, jump kick, and grapple enemies to their doom. Pick up weapons to use, food on the street to replenish life, and fight bosses at the end of each stage. Much like the original, you can use a special clearing move around yourself while sacrificing a bit of life. Defeat the final boss and return back home. Final Fight 2 was developed and published by Capcom for the Super Nintendo. And unlike the first Final Fight game, this one is not based on any arcade game. The original was such a massive hit for the home console that the sequel is made directly for the Super Nintendo. It may seem bizarre, but Final Fight was a household name in the early 90s. It pretty much supplanted Double Dragon as the de facto beat-em-up, and it was such a huge win for Nintendo that Sega needed to create the equally excellent Streets of Rage to compete with it. It wasn't just another generic game release. There was hype leading into it. Electronic Gaming Monthly previewed it twice, each time pointing out the biggest improvements over the original, having all 3 playable characters available, and that there's finally 2-player co-op. There's even a secret code so that each player can play as the same character, which always meant 2 Hagars doing synchronized spinning pile drivers. Nintendo Power issue 52 also previewed the game with a total of 8 pages, the same amount they gave to Super Mario All-Stars. They provided a walkthrough of, well, the entire game. Nintendo Power also reviewed it a month earlier in issue 51. In it, they gave it an average score of a 3.7 out of 5, one of the higher scores they've given. Final Fight 2 sold extremely well. The first game sold 1.5 million copies, and Final Fight 2 sold over 1 million, incredibly successful for a sequel. This would ensure that there would be a Final Fight 3, which would come out in 1996. There would be more Final Fight sequels, including Final Fight Revenge, a one-on-one fighting game, and, unfortunately, Final Fight Streetwise on PlayStation 2. The characters would stick around though. Guy, Cody, and Maki would all show up as playable characters in the Street Fighter series, both the main series and Alpha. Of course, the newest Street Fighter 6 takes place in Metro City, featuring a giant statue of Mayor Mike Hagar. Easily the biggest release of August and the most anticipated, released in August 1993 for the Super NES, was Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting.
Street Fighter 2 Turbo スーパーファミコンで新発売 Capcom
Street Fighter 2 Turbo is an updated version of Street Fighter 2. All 8 World Warriors return, only now with the 4 bosses, Vega, Balrog, Sagat, and M. Bison, as playable characters. It retains the same one-on-one fighting gameplay that the original game revolutionized, complete with Hadokens, Shoryukens, spinning bird kicks, and sonic booms. The major gameplay upgrade is right in its name. It's fast, turbo speed even. Fight friends in the versus mode or travel the world to take down the Shadow Lu and see every character's ending. Street Fighter 2 Turbo originally hit arcades in December of 1992. It's actually the 3rd edition of Street Fighter 2. The original release was early 1991, and the second version was Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition for arcades in early 1992, and onto the Sega Genesis in 1993. That's a whole mess on its own, and we'll get to that next month. Street Fighter 2 was massive when it came out and maintained its popularity for several years, in no small part thanks to its numerous updates.
It's the most lethal G.I. Joe team yet, Capcom Street Fighter 2! No way! Wait! There's Guile, Ryu, Zangief, Blanca, and Dalsin! What's a Dalsin? Oh! Vega, Sagat, Balrog! And me, El Bison! They look unbeatable! God! You know them, you love them! So correcto! Capcom Capcom Street Fighter 2 figures each sold separately.
Oh, I like them.
December of 1992 already had people talking about what they would want to see in a potential Street Fighter 3, like the article from Electronic Gaming Monthly. Capcom made it clear that they weren't working on a new Street Fighter game, but the rumors of another updated version kept circulating and building hype. The reveal of a Street Fighter 2 Turbo Champion Edition was first confirmed at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in 1993 to EGM. Nintendo Power Issue 51 made Street Fighter 2 Turbo its cover feature and gave it a whopping 14 pages of coverage, including a showcase of what's new for every single fighter. Street Fighter 2 Turbo was bigger than Mario, bigger than Zelda, bigger than Bubsy. Also, the original artwork Nintendo Power made is hilarious. Look at Ken's face. Look at it. Along with the turbo speed, the updated game balanced every single character, and you can now select the same character in versus mode without using a cheat code. Everyone also got all new special moves to use, with the exception of the 4 boss characters and Guile, who was already perfect thanks to his stage's theme song. Of course, it reviewed incredibly well. Nintendo Power awarded it an average score of a 4.1 out of 5, one of the highest scores we've seen them give yet. And Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it a 9.5 out of 10, along with the Editor's Choice Platinum Award. It sold like crazy, over 4 million copies across the world. It's this popularity that would set up the glorious 1994 Street Fighter live-action movie, and of course, numerous more updates to Street Fighter 2. In September 1993, arcades would get Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers. That would then get its own Turbo Edition, Hyper Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 HD Remix, and in 2017 it culminated with Ultra Street Fighter 2 for the Nintendo Switch. Put on your hockey mask and grab your 2x4, it's time for another go-around. Released at the end of August 1993 for the Sega Genesis, was Splatterhouse 3. Splatterhouse 3 is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Punch, kick, and throw every grotesque monstrosity that comes your way. Find health items and, of course, weapons to brutalize your enemies. Defeat every enemy to move on to the next room, fight massive bosses at the end of each level, and rescue your wife Jennifer and son David. Splatterhouse 3 was published by Namco, only 1 year after Splatterhouse 2, also on the Genesis. It has several innovations over the first 2 games. For one, there's now a Z-axis, which means you can move up and down to beat up enemies. It also doesn't go from left to right, it's actually a sort of maze that you need to navigate. There's also a timer, and if you don't beat the stage before it reaches 0, the storyline changes. There are 4 possible endings, with only one of them being the good one. The others all have some form of Jennifer dying, David dying, or both. Also, all the cutscenes use digitized actors standing in for the characters, which is quite the novelty for the time. Of course, one of the main draws of the Splatterhouse games is the absurd violence. Enemies split in half, guts spill out everywhere, and the monsters are gross. That was a selling point. Magazine advertisements even stated that this is the kind of game rating systems were invented for, which they're correct. The official Sega Game Ratings Board did mark the game with an MA13 for mature audiences because of all the blood, which these days is the equivalent of a T for teen. It ended up being the most well-received of the trilogy. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded mostly 8s and a 9 out of 10, along with the Editor's Choice Gold Award. GamePro magazine awarded almost perfect scores, warning that it can be nightmare-inducing. Splatterhouse 1 and Splatterhouse 2 would eventually get ported onto the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console. Splatterhouse 3 never got its own re-release, and it would be the last Splatterhouse game for 17 years. In 2010, a reboot titled Splatterhouse was made for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and one of the unlockables you can find is a fully playable Splatterhouse 3, although the digitized actors for the cutscenes were changed due to likenesses and legal issues. It's speculated that this is why Splatterhouse 3 has never gotten its own standalone re-release. As for everything else splattering onto retail stores this week, here's Editor Dylan.
Star Trek The Next Generation should have been called The Last Generation because it released on the NES. The mechanics and ideas are overambitious and the controls and hardware underperform, which is basically a fancy way of saying I'm too stupid to figure out what I'm supposed to do. But if you want to play it with even more limitations, then it also came out on Game Boy. Space simulators are definitely not meant for portable gaming systems. A more fitting game on the handheld would be Pinball Dreams. 2 buttons, 2 bumpers, 2 thumbs up from me. It even has themed tables ranging from spooky to space. Designing a pinball table sounds like fun. If you could make one, what would it look like? Well, Virtual Pinball on the Genesis gives you hundreds of combinations to find out for yourself. Will it be a bamboo board with psychotic action set to an apocalyptic soundtrack, or a fast, manic bloodbath with bits of gore all on top of a bathroom floor? I always enjoyed the theme clashing angle myself, like when ancient mystical magic meets futuristic sci-fi technology. And I'm not the only one, because Techno Clash takes this premise and runs with it. It's a top-down action RPG where you play as Ronin, a time-traveling wizard or something. You and your ragtag group of LARPers take on the Filthy Earthers, who embrace the high-tech life in the far-off lands of Las Vegas. Sure, it's hard as hell with its slow and clunky controls, but it's a cool concept with a bunch of spells, extensive dialogue, and fleshed-out characters, 2 of which are bodyguards who can fight alongside you. A wizard named Chaz and a barbarian with a name that'll probably get me in trouble if I say it out loud. Emergency segue! Racing games suck! Okay, not really. I love dozens of racing games, but growing up, there weren't many racers that really clicked with me outside of the arcade. I mean, who could resist the call of Day? Among the exceptions were Top Gear, solely for that soundtrack, and Super Off-Road, Baja Blast. I forgot to put the subtitle in the script. It's Baja something, or something Baja. Nothing groundbreaking, but it was satisfying to control, upgrade, and boost over every jump to get your guy to say Arriba every single time. But be warned, if you kill someone, you get deducted a staggering $3,000. What? That's like $6,300 in 2023, which is just a little more than double. Let me go ahead and repeat that. Money in 1993 is worth a little more than double in 2023. So if you absolutely need to know what inflation rates are on this show, it's about 2.12. Which is a little more than double. Every console got Nigel Mansell's World Championship Racing. Some versions probably came out earlier in August, but I'm lumping them all in here because that's a thing we do until we hit a dry spell of releases again. I don't really care for this game. Compared to Super Baja Blast, it's not as fun. The commercial's good though, so I'll yield the rest of my time for that.
Hi, I'm Nigel Mansell, and you know, I'm not the type of guy who buys his family presents that he really wants for himself. That's why I bought my wife Nigel Mansell's World Championship game from Nintendo. You have to choose the right tires, pit stop, and race against the best drivers in the world. It's just like the real thing, and my wife loves it. Right, darling?
Hi, it's very realistic, Nigel.
My little girls love it too. Right, twins? Completely true. Hey, even my dog loves it. Right, Fang? Woof. So, there you have it. I think it's a wonderful game, and if your family's anything like mine, they'll love it too. Right, girls?
Right, Nigel.
Woof.
13 games released on these 4 consoles this week in 1993. Fun fact, I put those pinball games in every episode that came out this month, but we had to keep pushing them back due to time constraints. And we still end up with episodes over 15 minutes long. But thank you for sticking with us, and remember, MSRP in 1993 is worth a little more than double today, okay? Okay, good.
All right, thank you, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Final Fight 2 is a bit uncommon. A loose cartridge is currently worth $53, and a complete in-box one is $237. Street Fighter 2 Turbo sold millions, so it isn't tough to get. A copy is only $20, and a complete one is right at $60. This week's biggest value gainer is Splatterhouse 3. It released costing $64.95, and now a copy of the game is worth $80. And with the box and manual, it goes up to $216. And that's it for today. Next week, Final Fantasy, not really, for the Game Boy, Sega's Ninja makes a 3rd game, and the war against the Kilrathi continues. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some supportive patrons like Tom Perslin, Alcahest, and Sarah Kemp. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you played any of the games mentioned this week, and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you already are a subscriber, thanks so much for watching this show every single Friday. Every time I talk about a Street Fighter game on this show, I think to myself, oh good, I'll just grab my copy of Street Fighter because I got it ready to put on the shelf. It's like a nice little Easter egg. But it turns out I only actually own Super Street Fighter 2, which is not the one we're talking about. We still have like a year off on that one. So every single time we talk about Street Fighter, I'm like, I got it. Wait, no, I don't. There's like 4 or 5 different versions of it. Give me a break.